The biggest news yesterday, a day off, presumably, week 2 of the college football season wrapping up on Saturday night. Sunday morning, late Saturday, I guess, really, we start getting news to have Mel Tucker facing sexual harassment allegations at Michigan State. He has now been suspended by the university. Latest development today, Mel Tucker responds. And we're going to go over that. Joining us now, he covers Michigan State for the Detroit Free Press, Chris Solari. Chris, appreciate you hopping on. I know you're super busy. Kind of get us up to speed where we are right now and what we know.
Well, up to speed is Mel Tucker on Sunday afternoon was suspended without pay. The outcome of a October 5th and 6th hearing at MSU for the allegations brought in the USA Today story by Brenda Tracy more than likely is going to be the determining factor. I mean, there can be things that happen between now and then in terms of reaching a settlement, potentially him resigning if they do get to some sort of agreement, but it does not seem like he's going to get the remainder. I mean, they could fire him with cause and get out from under the rest of the $95 million that contract that they gave him in 2021, which is a 10-year deal. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Mel Tucker gave his first response through his attorney this afternoon and again admitted to the allegations, but with the caveat that to him it was a consensual phone sex situation. But to Brenda Tracy in the story in USA Today, it was not consensual on her part.
And Chris, it's not really our job to editorialize something like this. It's he said, she said. We read the documents, we read the investigation. Have they given any reason for, or perhaps has Brenda Tracy rather given a reason for why she waited so long to report this? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she waited 3 months, or was it longer than that?
I believe the phone call was alleged to have taken place in April of 2022. And she filed the complaint in December of 2022. And I think some of it, as she has said, she's gone back into, because she is a survivor of a gang rape situation. So there's some trauma issues, I think, from that were part of this. I think that there were some other extenuating things in terms of whether or not she wanted to come forward, knowing what type of reaction it was going to be, and also the fact that she and Tucker had built a close personal relationship up until the point of that phone call. So they did try and keep it quiet. I know that both sides were very quiet about this, and the hope and goal for that story wasn't going to be to come out until closer to that point in the sand where that October 5th and 6th hearing is. But there were some external pressures from a few different entities that I think forced that story to go when it did early Sunday morning, probably about 12:45 on the USA Today story, and ESPN's story that had a little bit of bare bones on the circumstances was, I believe, about 12:15. So that, I think, was part of the reason why it happened the way it did.
Chris, let's not focus on Mel Tucker for a minute. How does Michigan State survive this? I mean, even if Mel Tucker said today, and you, the expert on this, you know way more about it at this point than I do. Mel Tucker says he's going to vehemently challenge these allegations. He's going to defend himself and all that. That's his right, and I get that. But I don't see how Michigan State can win this either way. If they fire Mel Tucker, then they're going to come under fire, under heat for perhaps getting rid of him because he's underperformed after getting that monster contract. If they don't fire Mel Tucker, they're going to catch heat for that too. How does Michigan State escape this unscathed, or is it just to the point where they can't win? They're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
I think at this point, I don't necessarily know if there are any winners, or I mean, quite frankly, the sentiment really turned on Mel Tucker, and I think some of that had been percolating a little bit after missing a bowl game last year. But I think a lot of what was in that story really turned some of that. And I think that's a big reason, because athletic director Alan Haller and interim president Teresa Woodruff said they did not know the details of the situation, which is how Title IX cases are supposed to be handled. And that is something I think, because of the fact that it was a very embarrassing and now public situation, I think that forced them to go to the suspension, and the contract situation and the impending case on October 5th and 6th. Those are the things that I think are the reason why he was suspended rather than fired at this moment. I don't think there's any way of coming back. I at this point, the allegations and the admission, and I think that's a big thing about why it ended up getting to this, the admission part, that where he said, "Oh, I did this on the phone." That I don't think there's any returning to Michigan State from that, and I think it'll be a point where both parties kind of need to move on because of the embarrassment factor.
Chris, just a couple more minutes, please. You look at the Michigan State program investing heavily in Mel Tucker. It's a transformative period for the Big Ten. You've got the new schools coming in next year. Looking ahead to 2024 and beyond, what's the ceiling for Michigan State football realistically? You look at Michigan State, how would you evaluate the resources and everything going forward with Mel Tucker and without Mel Tucker?
Well, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that one thing Mel Tucker did do was galvanize some of the big money donors, in particular Matt Ishbia, who's now the owner of the Phoenix Suns. Prior to him buying the Suns, he invested heavily and donated an extensive amount of money, both for a new football facility that's going to be named after Tom Izzo, because that's just the Michigan State way. You name the football facility after the basketball coach, and you name the hockey arena after the former football coach. So it's a really weird circumstances up here with that. But I do think that the resources are there. I mean, you've got a couple multi-millionaire to billionaires that are there to back the program and have shown the willingness to back the program. Ishbia and Steve St. Andre both contributed to that massive contract extension in 2021 and are footing a large chunk of the bill. So I think there's concern about getting out from the rest of that contract, but they showed they're willing to pay $9.5 million to a guy who had 2 years of head coaching experience, 2.5 years of head coaching experience, when they gave him that money after the 8-0 start in 2021 that you guys know well. Kenneth Walker was a big contributing factor to that, and there's a lot of people around Michigan State circles who say that Mel Tucker should be giving Kenneth Walker part of his salary, quite honestly, from that. But the resources are there, and I think that because we're looking at a transactional and such a transient environment right now in college football, which I think in some ways, for how quick and the rise and fall and really more than likely dismissal of Mel Tucker went, it kind of mirrors what college football is right now in terms of that transitory phase that it's in. You're going to see guys that are coming and going via the transfer portal. You saw what he did here in 2021, building through the portal, which the next logical step was the Deion Sanders situation at Colorado, where you broom a whole roster and bring it in. It can be done now. I mean, the winning on the field involves that talent evaluation in the portal as much as it does identifying high school recruits, if you want to revive and revamp a program quickly. So it's about finding the right fit. And coming off Mark D'Antonio, who was here for 13 years, that sort of stability, are you going to find that kind of coach again? D'Antonio's back to assist Harlan Barnett, who's the acting head coach during Tucker's suspension, and more than likely, if and when a separation agreement is reached, Barnett will take over as the interim coach, I would assume, for the rest of the season. But having Mark D'Antonio around the program for 13 years when he was the head coach, there was stability here that Michigan State hadn't enjoyed since Duffy Daugherty and Biggie Munn. And that brought winning that you hadn't seen since those two Hall of Fame coaches. So I do think that they're cognizant of that. They don't want someone who's going to come and make Michigan State another whistle stop on their way to the NFL, or another major program, kind of like Nick Saban did, and how George Perlis dangled that for years and years and years. I think they want someone more like D'Antonio who looks at the program as a whole and says, now we have the resources, now we have the backing of the donors, and we have the facilities. Let's put together a program here for the next 20 years.
And Chris, I know you have to go. Can you just tell me a little bit about Harlan Barnett, the interim coach?
Yeah, Harlan was, I think folks in the ACC are probably a little familiar with him from his 2-year stint at Florida State as defensive coordinator there. But he was with Mark D'Antonio here at Michigan State for, I believe, the 10 or 11 years prior to that. He followed him from Cincinnati. He's a Michigan State alum. He played 7 years in the NFL. A really good guy. I think that's an important thing. He and Michigan State's athletic director, Alan Haller, were defensive back teammates on George Perlis' teams in the late 80s, early 90s. So I think the familiarity and trust is there, plus the familiarity and ability to bring in D'Antonio to serve as an associate head coach to kind of help him along and possibly prepare him for a longer term job. I would think they hope, or he hopes. I think that he seems like the right guy at the moment with everything that's transpired, because he again, you're talking about a guy who's been at Michigan State for the most part for the last 40 years. So that does give a little bit of stability. Whether or not he can win as a head coach at this level, we're going to find out probably in the next 10 to 11 weeks.
Last question. What's your gut tell you when they make a move?
In terms of Tucker?
Yeah.
My gut is the October 5th, 6th hearing will be the line in the sand, unless, and I think this is a big unless, if they're able to reach some sort of pre-hearing settlement, knowing that there might be more embarrassing details coming for all parties. If they're able to reach some sort of negotiated deal where Tucker resigns, either gets part of his remaining salary or signs some sort of non-disclosure agreement, I do think that it's going to be that is a potential. Will it happen? I don't know. But I don't know if they want a lot of the details, further details, put out in the public because of the embarrassment factor for everybody involved.
It's Chris Solari, Detroit Free Press. Follow him on X. It's X, Chris. It's not Twitter. It's X. At Chris Solari. It's X.
I'll Z that later.
You're the man, brother. Appreciate you hopping on.
See you, Scott, man. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.